Sorry, someone came to the door. I'm reading at the bottom of page 35, and I'm going to repeat the last paragraph. When they finished breakfast on the morning of the 23rd, Martha Morse put her elbows firmly on the table, resting her chin in her two hands, and looked across at Ronnie. Her face was serene, and her keen gray eyes were almost smiling. Almost, Ronnie thought, as if she knew a secret. "Ronnie," she began, "we may as well face the facts. Byron Flagg's not coming before Christmas. Now, I've never spent Christmas in my life in any place that I haven't scrubbed it till it's shown, and I'm not going to begin now. You and I are going to start right in. By night, this whole lighthouse has got to shine like the lamp itself." "Oh, Aunt Martha," Ronnie protested, "it's clean as a whistle. There's not a speck of dust anywhere." His aunt laughed at him. "I know it," she said, "but we'll give it an extra loving polish anyhow, just because it's Christmas." "A loving polish," Ronnie grumbled. "Ronnie," Mrs. Morse said gently, "for hundreds and hundreds of years, men have believed that on Christmas Eve the Christ child goes visiting. He goes into all kinds of homes. None is too poor, too distant. That's why we make our houses as lovely as we can. We must be ready." "But we can't trim it up one tiny bit. We haven't a single thing to make it look Christmassy." "Well, we can give it the beauty of perfect cleanliness," she said, "and tomorrow we'll bake." "Bake what?" Ronnie demanded. "Oh, I don't know yet, but I'll ransack the keeper's stores and see what I can find. I'll fashion some kind of pudding, you'll see, and no woman can call herself a cook who can't work a miracle with spices and molasses. But today, remember, we scrub. I want you to begin on the storage locker on the second landing. There's nothing heavy there, just light cases. You can move them easily and set them back when you're finished." Her energy was contagious. And Ronnie melted a little. "All right, Aunt Martha," he said more good-naturedly. "If you say shine, we'll shine. But it won't hurry that mean old Flag along." They hurried through the breakfast work and did the lamp with scrupulous care before Ronnie started on his storage locker. 15 minutes later, Mrs. Morse was startled by a shout from above. "Aunt Martha, come quick, see what I found." "What on earth is it? Don't tell me you found Byron Flagg himself packed in the locker." She laughed as she flew up the stairs. Ronnie was kneeling beside a seaman's chest. "Look!" And there's a picture of him by the seaman's chest, and there's a sign that says Merry Christmas, or Christmas greetings, sorry. "It's got my name on it," he said excitedly. "How can there be a box here for me? And it says Christmas greetings on it too. Oh, that's funny." He looked up at his aunt. At the sight of her face full of concern, the answer came to him too. The laughter died out of his face. He put his head down on the chest and shook with dry sobs. But in a moment he was on his feet, his face white with anger. See, his eyes are all furrowed. "He planned this whole thing, Aunt Martha, didn't he? He knew all along he was going to leave us here. He didn't break a leg or something so he couldn't come. He cheated. Martha Morse was almost frightened at his sudden rage. She interrupted quietly. "Hadn't you better open the box, Ronnie? Let's see what's in it." "I don't want to open it. I don't care what it is," he stormed. "Well, I do," she said firmly. "A box marked Christmas is always worth looking into. Of course, it has your name on it, but..." "Oh, I don't care whose name is on it. Open it if you want to. I'm not the tiniest bit interested. I never want to see what's in it." He turned his back and stood kicking his boot against the stair rail. Martha Morse knelt beside the chest and slipped the bolt. When she lifted the lid, an exclamation of pleasure escaped from her. It was a strange collection of things that Byron Flagg had gathered together. She lifted them out, spread them around on the floor. There was a little cask of West Indies red peppers, a rare treat for a northern appetite. Another little cask held rich brown sugar. There were great bunches of big blue raisins wrapped in fine oiled silk, and in other silk packages Turkish paste and strange sweets from the East, dried fruits and nuts. There were tamarind preserves and preserved ginger in gray-blue jars, and at the very bottom, a lovely teakwood box. Mrs. Morris held the box in her lap, unopened, and looked up at Ronnie's grim back. He was staring out the window, silent now for want of breath. "Wouldn't you like to open this box, Ronnie?" she asked gently. "It's not fair that I should have all the fun." Byron Flagg must have been collecting treats for us for months. Finally, he traded with every passing ship that he probably could get to put off a boat. "That's just it. That's why I'm so mad, Aunt Martha." All Ronnie's anger flared up again. "He's a bad old man, and I'd like to swim straight to New Brunswick when he's gone. I'd like to burst open the door and tell him how I despise him. I'm to open the box then, am I, Ronnie?" Aunt Martha interrupted. "I won't. Go ahead if you're curious. He can't buy me," Ronnie said rudely. And here we have another picture of how angry he still is. Have you ever been really disappointed by something? An event that you wanted to go to that you couldn't go to? Well, then you know how Ronnie's feeling. Mrs. Morse lifted the cover of the teakwood box. On the top, with her name pinned to it, lay a lovely cashmere shawl. Below were carved whalebone and ivory toys. Such things as sailors made to while away the weary hours on shipboard were no novelty to Martha Morse, but she had never seen more beautiful workmanship than these. There was a little whaleboat, complete in every detail. Its bow box and stern locker, its rowlocks and its 6 oars of varying lengths, the tiny tubs in their places, each with its coiled lines carved in minute perfection. There were harpoons and lances, their sheathed tips resting in the cleats, the buckets, the water keg, all the work of days and days. She could see homesick men on quiet seas, waiting for a breeze to fill their sail. Big hands with cunning fingers, fashioning in miniature the tools of their craft. And we have a picture here, and you can see there's a boat, sails, and harpoons. "How some boys would treasure these," she said. "This harpoon now," but Ronnie was restless. "I could harpoon that man my own self. He's just a selfish old man," he stormed. "Well, maybe he is selfish," she agreed, "but I think he has parted with things he's treasured all his life long, just to make amends to us." Ronnie was not listening, and she went on thinking out loud. "This shawl, for instance. Like as not, he chose this cream with shades of violet himself for some golden-haired girl with pansy eyes, no doubt. I wonder why he never gave it to her. And here's a letter with both our names on it." "I don't want to read this old letter. I won't listen to it," Ronnie said. Suddenly an idea came to him. He turned to his aunt in excitement. "Aunt Martha, I know what. We can fire the cannon. Then somebody will come and take us off the rock. Why didn't we think of that before?" Martha Morse looked at the boy in amazement. "Fire the cannon?" She spoke as if she could not possibly have heard correctly. "Why, Ronnie, that cannon is for emergencies." "Well, isn't this emergency?" Ronnie wanted to know. Mrs. Morse's patience was at an end. "No, it's not," she said firmly. "An emergency, the kind that cannon is for, means that a ship off there on the ledges is breaking up. There are helpless sailors clinging like little black ants to spars, being washed off into eternity while you watch. No, Ronnie, this is no emergency. We are two able-bodied beings left to guard a light, and we'll do it. Christmas or not. And what's more, we'll do it without all this self-pity, those tantrums. Ronnie was startled out of his sense of grievance. But Aunt Martha, he began. I've heard enough, Ronnie, his aunt interrupted. Nobody's going to spoil my Christmas, not Byron Flagg, and not a sniveling little boy either. But I'm not sniveling, Ronnie was indignant. Well, you might as well be. You've gone all to pieces because you're missing a Christmas party at school and a measly stocking full of candy. Well, that's not true. But you're just as disappointed as I am this minute. Of course I am. And with more reason, too, Martha Morse told him. You'll have 50 more Christmases in your life, probably, but I won't. And the chance to lift my voice to the Lord in the old Christmas hymns with my neighbors and friends around me and the peace of a Christmas service is more precious than you can understand at your age. But Christmas, Ronnie, is something in your heart. It's a feeling that doesn't go with anger and hatred. And my heart's got to be clean and ready for Christmas. It's going to be clean as this lighthouse, Ronnie. I can't even be angry with you, child. Then she added more gently, go to your room now, Ronnie. I'll finish what has to be done, and I'll do it best alone. Under the circumstances, I'm not punishing you. I know you're not the spoiled urchin you'd like me to believe, but I know you'll feel better when you've cooled off and had time to think. What you need at the moment is some real lonesomeness. Run along now, child, and get it. All the rest of that day, Ronnie sulked, while his aunt scrubbed and polished and dusted in a kind of holiday ecstasy. He ate his meals in silence, and she ignored him cheerfully. And here you see, well, he is certainly disappointed. And the next chapter will be called Christmas Eve. On the day before Christmas, Martha Morse cooked and baked. Good smells of spices and molasses and brown sugar crept through the lighthouse and up the winding stairs until the very walls seemed to sniff in pleasure. She was through at last and changed into her dark red merino with its braided yoke and sleeves. The short afternoon drew to a close. The feeling of breathless expectancy that comes before Christmas Eve began to exert itself. The comfortable, shining common room with its sparse dignity, the gray-walled tower with its soaring grace quieted themselves to wait. Something was to be born anew into this world. This night, the ageless Christmas miracle would repeat itself. At sunset, Martha Morse rapped on the door of Ronnie's bunk room. She carried Byron Flagg's letter in her apron pocket. Ronnie, it's time to light the lamp. Will you come, or shall I go alone? I can manage if you'd rather not. Her voice was gentle but cheerful. Ronnie opened his door, stepped out on the landing. He avoided looking at her. I'll come, Aunt Martha. I haven't been any help today, he added. Well, I've been too busy to notice, she told him briskly. But just run down and see the tea table before we go aloft. I think it looks real nice. Ronnie ran down the short flight of stairs. He gave a little gasp at the sight of the table. It stood against the wall with their places set at either end, and its smooth pine surface was almost hidden with good things that Aunt Martha had somehow contrived. For a centerpiece of monumental brown cake, crusty and fragrant, bursting with raisins and nuts, formed a sort of bold headland at whose feet lay a white beach of tiny stones, and drawn up on the beach was the little carved whale boat, with all the whaling gear spread out on the shore for overhauling. There were cookies trimmed with bits of candied fruit, sliced corned beef in a wreath of red stars cut from the West Indies peppers, tiny dishes of the rare preserves sparkling against the wholesome background of brown bread, and from the back of the stove where they stood came the fragrance of simmering potatoes. And I'll show you the picture. Ronnie swallowed once or twice, but no words came at first. Martha Morse, watching from the bottom step, could feel his pleasure and was completely satisfied. "Gee, Aunt Martha, it's pretty," he got out finally, "and I'll bet you had that corned beef tonight because it's red for Christmas. And you cut out all those little stars yourself?" "Well, I'm relieved to hear you call them stars," she said lightly. "I was afraid they looked so much like starfish that they'd spoil your appetite." "Oh, they're lovely stars, Aunt Martha," Ronnie assured her. "I never once thought of starfish, at least not till you said it first." They laughed comfortably together as they started up the winding stairs. The lamp chamber always gave Ronnie a strange feeling. You reached it breathless from the long climb, but at the top step something else took over. The sea, piling up on the horizon, the expanse of sky, the bold swooping and circling of the gulls lifted you somehow. You felt light as air, as though you had only to lay a finger gently on a gull's claw to go off and up. But tonight there was something more. The whole chamber was diffused with color, a dull green and gold from the glow still lingering in the western sky. It gave everything a gentle radiance of its own. Ronnie pressed his nose against the window pane and looked out to sea. It was fairly quiet. There was no wind, no waves to speak of, but the whole sea seemed to rise and fall and heave with lazy power. And it too was as green and bronze in the strange light as molten metal. A few careless snowflakes drifted down. A few sleepy gulls made last dips in circles, and their mewing was hushed and came softly to him through the glass. Ronnie felt as if some hard kernel within him had suddenly begun to swell, to expand. He looked quickly at Aunt Martha to see if she looked different, and she did. Her quiet face was so glowing in the fading light that he wanted to throw his arms around her and hold her close because she was too beautiful to bear. And here's a picture of him looking out the glass. "Aunt Martha," he said in a small voice, "do you remember what you said yesterday about Christmas? Christmas in your heart, I mean." "Yes, I remember," she told him. "And you've got some of it tonight, haven't you?" "Well, you told me think, and I've done a lot of it since yesterday. And somehow this old rock doesn't seem so bad tonight. It's beautiful up here right now. And this queer light must be something special just for Christmas Eve." His aunt nodded, but she did not speak. "You know what, Aunt Martha," Ronnie went on after a pause, "I'd like to hear that Byron Flagg's letter after all, I guess." "So would I, Ronnie, so I brought it up," she told him. "We'll light our lamp and then we'll read it." Together they lighted the great wicks and adjusted them. Together they swung the door shut and made fast the catch. Together they set the carriage revolving. Then Aunt Martha gave a sigh of satisfaction and murmured softly under her breath her little evening prayer. "A straight, true light. God help you to protect all souls at sea this night." The flame pulled up and then settled to a steady glow. The mechanism steadied to its long night's course. Out across the dark water, it swung its message of assurance. They watched it for a moment, stirred as always to see what they had set in motion, but humble too. Then Martha Morse drew the boy down beside her to a step around the first bend, out of the flash and grinding noise. She pulled the keeper's letter from her apron pocket and read it aloud in the dim half-light. "Dear Mrs. Morse and Ronnie," here's a picture of her reading it. "I have played you a mean trick. Yes, and I planned it long and careful. I don't expect you to get much happiness out of it either, and let me tell you the reason. I am more than 60 years old, and I have never yet spent a Christmas with a parcel of young ones. I was an only child. We lived a long way from any neighbors. I shipped to sea at 10, and so it went. Last Christmas, I promised myself I'd spend this one with my niece's family. There's 7 of them, all told. And when I couldn't get relieved, I took this way. Please try to think kinder of me than I deserve. Byron Flagg. There was a long pause when she'd finished. Ronnie sat so still he might have been asleep. Well, do we go on hating him? She asked at last. Poor, mean old man, Ronnie said finally. Then he laughed a little rueful laugh. If he came pounding on the sea door right this minute, wanting his old lighthouse back for Christmas, I wouldn't want to give it to him, I guess, Aunt Martha. I want to be right here tonight. I guess I do too, she told him softly. They sat watching their bit of stair and tower wall lighten and darken as a lens swung round. And then Ronnie went on slowly. All over the world on Christmas Eve, people are putting little candles in their windows to light the Christ child on his way. They're doing it right now, aren't they? This very minute. It's almost the very nicest of all the special things we do on Christmas. He groped a little for the right words. The thought had come to him would take good words. We've lighted a candle tonight too, a big one. We've lighted the biggest candle we'll ever have a chance to light for him, to help him on his way. He leaned against her suddenly, and he gave a long, long sigh of perfect content. Then he added softly, Aunt Martha, Tern Rock lights the loveliest place in all the world to spend his birthday. If that Christmas Eve over dark water, a small dark lad in Eastern dress with sandaled feet happened to follow a flashing light to a distant lighthouse, he would find all in readiness within. And we have this picture. So it all ended well, and we have to assume that they eventually got off the rock. Hope you enjoyed this book. It was a short one, but it has a nice Christmas message. Bye-bye.